And Carrie Egan wrote a great essay in the book I want to share a little bit too. For Carrie, it's this experience of breastfeeding her newborn son that breathes life into the drama of the Mass. She describes a memory of breastfeeding her son, Jimmy. She writes, "By the time I noticed it, I had been repeating a phrase over and over again. Take this and eat it. This is my body." That's just amazing. I looked down at Jimmy as he clung to me. "Oh," I nearly shouted. He stirred, lifted his half-closed eyes to me, and then rooted around until he found the nipple again and settled into my armpit. "So that's what that means," I said out loud. After 31 years as a cradle Catholic, the Eucharist finally made sense. For many of our authors, growing up Catholic roots us in Catholicism. Even when the theology frustrates us, or we struggle to find meaning in the ritual, we feel a sense of home as we walk into Catholic Mass. Secondly, being Catholic teaches us that holiness is not only in churches or in formal prayer gatherings. It is also in working with the poor, exploring nature, and meditating. An appreciation for the many sites of holiness pervades our Catholicism and our lives. I think one of the best examples of this comes from a piece by Sister Julie Vieira. She's an IHM in Monroe, Michigan. She maintains this great blog, A Nun's Life, if you're interested. Sister Julie's dad led a small singing group in preparation for the weekly folk mass. So the young Sister Julie spent hours of rehearsal time running around the church, exploring the sacristy, practicing homilies from the pulpit, and these evenings spent combing the church taught her about the sacredness of life within a church. And as experiencing holiness in this tangible way inside the church, it gave her the tools to see holiness in nature, in her family, and in her daily life outside of the church. I think Helena Fleig also writes about the many sites of holiness. When she started dating this Zen Buddhist man, she began exploring his faith. As a lifelong Mass attendee, Buddhism challenged Helena's Catholic-honed sense of black and white. One Sunday night at dinner with her fiancés, the guy later became her fiancé, family and neighbors, Helena realized that she would miss dinner if she left to attend Mass. Hemming and hawing, she suddenly understood that God was not just at Mass, not just waiting for her, but God was there at Doug's family's table, where these old and young, abled and disabled, from far and near were seated, and that Christ was fully present in each one of us, and in the bread that we were breaking. And this realization changed Helena's Catholicism. She still is a more than regular Mass attendee, but Buddhism has allowed her to appreciate the gray areas in her own maturing faith. Thirdly, many of us are committed to integrating spiritual practices and social action into our Catholic identity. The women in this collection talk about encountering God in Haitian orphanages, in Catholic workers, soup kitchens, in domestic violence shelters, at LGBTQ law offices, and at the gates of Fort Benning. The study I previously mentioned, suggests that this is a point of divergence from previous generations of Catholicism, their understanding of what keeps us committed to our Catholicism. Rather than evangelization, many young adult Catholics make meaning of our tradition through service and social justice work. There is this great article by a university minister. Her name is Claire Noonan, and she wrote, "What Catholics under 30 are doing right," in the U.S. Catholic article. And she explains that service work is a central tenet of young adults Catholicism. She highlights several young Catholics who have committed their lives to various forms of service and social justice work. The Jesuit volunteer, Peace Corps, these sort of things. This eagerness to keep Catholic identity bound up in service, I think it echoes throughout this collection. Stories of how Dorothy Day became their heroine, and how Catholic social teaching saved their Catholic identity. Johanna Hatch, who's also, I think she was 05 or something from St. Ben, she gives a great example. When she reported for her first day of work at a homeless shelter, also a domestic violence shelter, she was primarily concerned with the correct pronunciation of the unfamiliar names of women from different parts of Africa. She was baptized by the women's needs, confirmed by their sharing of troubles and joys, and blessed by breaking bread with them. Johanna was initiated into their community, and she left her placement at Sarah's, the place where she was, realizing she had grown in her own spirituality more than her feminist consciousness could ever have imagined she would. Fourth, there is a real tension in these essays between the church as it is and the church as it could be. We dream of women priests, more inclusive rules in the church, and a more widespread commitment to service and justice work. I should say, when we started this project, we definitely didn't plan to edit a book on church reform. It was definitely not our intention. And it's not really, but it turns out several of the women who sent us their memoirs were really calling for it. Again, this Hogue study, which is a really interesting insight, though getting a little old. It points out that for a small number of well-educated young adult Catholics, Catholic identity is derived from a knowledge of the faith where an individual claims the authority to interpret doctrine and the autonomy to offer doctrinally sound reasons in favor of change. And many of the women in this essay, or in this collection, definitely do that. There's a great essay by Margaret Scanlon. She tells a story of eating clam chowder on a Friday in Lent with her friend Jake, and he is surprised that she orders clam chowder, and he says, "You're Catholic? Why? But you're so smart." In her essay, she sort of dreams about what the perfect retort to that would be, and she says, the phrase is, "Because I like patriarchy," or "Who doesn't like celibate men dictating the rules about sex?" They didn't have the right amount of chutzpah for her. So, in some ways, being Catholic really infuriates Margaret. Sex abuse scandal, evil arguments against women's ordination, the monolithic approach, as she sees it, to abortion. But being Catholic, Margaret knows, is more about bloodlines and family than snappy retorts will ever allow. Margaret loves being Catholic, the ritual, the life of Christ, the community of believers that really speak to her. And she cannot, it seems, not stay Catholic. So in her imaginary re-conversation with her friend Jake, she says, "My church is, at root, a community of people. We attempt to respond to God's love for the world as best we know how, in our everyday lives. And so, Jake, I'm Catholic. I stay." I feel like it's So over and over, it's not necessarily that these women in this collection feel called to priesthood, though several certainly do. What is more poignant for these young women is that the opportunity is closed, that what we are truly seeking is the opportunity to be able to honestly discern callings to priesthood or not. One of the really interesting things we noticed is that many women in these essays write about strong Catholic role models, often women. Our moms, our academic mentors, the women in the pages of scripture, these gutsy Catholic women and men to inspire our Catholic identity. Like many of us, Angela Beatty looked to her mom as a role model before she entered a Catholic worker house or learned of the movement to close the School of Americas. Although her friends knew Angela's mom as Mrs. Beatty, the sisters at the monastery knew her as Sister Helen. Several years ago, with some serious questions about the church, Angela asked her mom why she stayed Catholic. "Because it's home," the former nun replied without hesitation. And Angela is realizing the same is true for her. She studies Catholic theology because it is important to her and is drawn to working in Catholic campus ministry. Turns out, Angela's mom had given her Catholicism just as much as she'd given her thick hair and a strange shape for instep.